morning. Thank you everyone for joining us. Our session today is Analytics Embracing a World in Crisis, Integrating Certainty and Uncertainty. I have with me today Juan Nunez. He is our Data and Analytics Practice Leader, and Lisa Cavanaugh. She is a Senior Executive here at MicroStrategies. Lisa, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Kelly. And Juan, thank you so much. I'm very excited about our conversation today. Love the topics of data analytics. I know how passionate you are about them. So why don't you just take a minute just to tell us about yourself and about MicroStrategies?
Well, thank you. I'm really excited as well. This is a very close to my heart topic. About myself, I lead the practice, data analytics practice at MicroStrategies, and I lead a very talented group of professionals, and we look after data management, visualization, and advanced analytics. But we're part of a bigger piece at MicroStrategies. At the end of the day, it's all about value. It's about the value that we deliver to our customers. And when you think about that, getting to that value, there's some critical components around their business models and their operational models. How do they create value for their customers? How do they operate? And being able to understand the content components and ultimately powering the decisions that you may make in that cycle, that's what we're all about. There's technology components that go underneath that, and those technology components and the flexibility needed to operate, it's critical as we think about how do we get to decisions and actions. How do we support those through the use of data and analytics? Surrounding all of that, then we think about the capability and the capacity, right? So it's not just about putting something together and delivering it and there you go. We understand that you have to operate these things. So that's where we introduce our managed services and help our clients being able to operate and expand on their capacity to do so. So that's kind of how we fit within the
So basically a holistic way that micro approach is really driving that value for the organization. And clearly analytics is a key component, as we said, is near and dear to your heart. So I'm going to shift to a question that I have for you, specifically around, I know some of the themes for our conversation today. We talk a bit about certainty and uncertainty, but very specifically a quote from Taleb, where we talk about being fooled by the data effect and the phenomenon of big data, and the concepts of cherry picking, what we think is important. You know, I'm curious to say, you know, how do you kind of piece those pieces together, and what is your perspective on how that applies to fragility and anti-fragility for organizations?
Look, there's very interesting dynamics when it comes down to data. You will hear things like, you have to get all the data you could possibly get to be able to make decisions. And there's some challenges with that, because yes, you may have a lot of data and there may be a lot of information in there, but having lots of data can lead to a couple of different challenges. One of them is cherry picking, right? So you can, Tal talked about cherry picking, and you can actually go and within lots of data, you can find the data that fits your story or fits the bias that you may come into the quest with. So we have to be very cautious, and look, it's really a challenge here, because if you look back in time, we have been for a long time talking about going into data and being cautious with confirmation biases, but those have existed in the past and continue to exist today, especially when pressure on our businesses increases. We may get more intent in finding some answers. That could be a challenge. The other problem is when we think about, hey, past approaches, things that we've been doing in the past will continue to work. We just have to adjust for what's happening today. That's a very risky proposition because we may be missing key components of the shifts that are continuously occurring. Yes, the shifts happen all the time, and they have been happening all the time, but there's some very different dynamics with what we're going through today on the data. So how do we get to anti-fragility? We'll probably talk a little bit more about some of those things. Initially, the thought I would want to put on the table is there are things that are stable, and there are those anchor events in our businesses where we can actually ground ourselves on to then start reaching out into the things that are shifting and changing. Mm-hmm. So identifying stable events and unstable, it's a key component of being able to make that move.
Okay, that sounds great. You talked a lot about the bias pieces and how you really, how that applies to your biases kind of feed into how you kind of like cherry pick the data. What are some of the things that you feel as though, or the disciplines organizations need to have in place, especially when you talk about the world of AI and people kind of may think that that's going to be the be all end all to things. How do you when you're working with data, try to overcome those or ensure that you're being as objective, I guess, as possible to not cherry pick or to introduce those biases?
Look, Lisa, I think that the critical component there is a technology does not replace the component that a person can bring, and that's a combination of intuition and understanding of the processes and the biases we might come into a situation with, the biases that may be hidden within the data. So I'm really concerned about what I see in some areas. Customers are being told, hey, look, AI is going to solve all the problems. There's things like automated AI that you can deploy, and you can have the citizen data scientists. I think it's very good, the idea of having people that embrace data and interact with data and work with data. It's a terrific idea. But let's be very cautious, and we have to be very cautious. This is what I tell my customers. We have to be very cautious and not delegating the responsibility of making these critical business decisions and adjustments to a technology. Can we leverage those technologies? Absolutely. We can leverage auto AI to get through very quickly through learning and identifying some variables. But then we need to add another layer and start thinking about, okay, so this automated AI identified a number of variables. Now I'm going to apply some randomness to it. Now I'm going to put my own intuition and going to start testing it. I'm going to start breaking it and see how well it does. So it accelerates our ability to get to some of these answers, right? So what are some critical components of making a decision? But at the same time, it doesn't just go with that answer. We start to test it, we start to challenge it, and we start to add our own intuition, again, based on the knowledge of your data science team, or even that's where we come in, right? That's where we help our customers coming in and helping them think through those things and actually applying that randomness to their models, if you will.
So that's with respects to the history bias. I'm going to hone in on that for a second. Obviously, we live in the world of disruption. We always have been. I mean, technology has been a huge disruptor to what we've done, but COVID has been the most, I think, worldwide disruptor that we in our lifetime have experienced. So clearly that has an impact on the data and has an impact on not only the data, but also our biases with respects to history, because we're all in a different severity of unknown than I think that we've experienced in the past. what do you think the greatest impacts on data are and that people really need to consider? And what are you considering as you approach looking at data today as a result of COVID?
I think that is a really good question, Lisa. I think that's some of it is unknown just by its nature, and we're going to discover it over time. But one of the bigger things we need to be aware of right now, I was talking a little earlier about stable events. Even the things that continue to happen, right? So let's say specifically one of our customers we're working with, they, 1/3 of their inventory comes from China. That was disrupted in a big way. But 2/3 of their inventory come from the US and other places that weren't as impacted. So what we do with that is let's ground on the things that are not necessarily changing, on those anchor events, and at the same time look at the shifts between that are impacting that supply chain. So you have a stable event, which is inventory continues to be sourced from your factories in the US or near shore. But then your customers are shopping differently. The way you distribute that inventory through the supply chain is different. So even within those stable events, there are shifts that we need to understand. And in that case, we're applying a series of methods around shift analytics to understand the before and after. There is a before and after in this data. Normally, it's normal for data to shift and change, but we didn't expect this level of changes. So we have to be very skeptical on the things that we have had set up for a long time, right? Those models that we had in pre-COVID, right? In January, they were just fine. In February, they were just fine. Those models now are not predictive of the future because the data does not represent what is going to happen. What is going to happen is the unknown part. And, some of it, we start chipping away at it. So specifically for this customer, one of the things that we're working on is understanding the shifts in customer behaviors, right? And you can't just necessarily say, okay, I'm going to use all data to predict what they're going to do next, because customers are interacting with us completely differently. There are new ways of shopping. There are new ways of interacting with companies. And we live it in our own lives. We may not be buying a certain category. We're shifting to other categories that perhaps we didn't shop on before. We're actually developing loyalty to companies that are meeting our needs right now, right? So there's a specific company that we never shopped on before, and now we shop from them because they delivered a specific need that we had. So that's a lot of situational information. The specifics are, we are deploying a new set of models that are adaptive in nature, so that they don't necessarily rely in only historical data, but they combine historical data with the new data that is being generated, and sometimes new data that we're helping collect. New interactions in the stores, perhaps. Perhaps the introduction of Bluetooth devices to understand how customers are interacting or even navigating through the stores in a more granular level than we did before. And with that information, continue to learn and start chipping away at the unknown.
So you talk about the adaptive models. Do you think that the adaptive models protect us in the future from disruptors, or how do you think that organizations should look at the adaptive models to not actually introduce other biases potentially?
Yeah, so it has to be thought through, grounding on your stable events and your valuable history. and using those adaptive models to pick up the new things. So we talked a little bit that business is in constant shift, right? So the behaviors that we're going to observe over the next 3 months aren't necessarily going to be behaviors next year.
Mm-hmm.
New business models, new ways of interacting will emerge. So the way does this help us protect from future changes? I think the adaptability is something that helps us learn about the changes as they're happening, and not necessarily think about a frequentist approach where you actually have to collect all the data before you can make a decision. So the idea is to collect enough data to start driving into a direction. And it's the whole idea of explore and exploit. Explore the things that are confirmed and where the models learn enough to become predictive through that learning. So then we continue to exploit and explore, continue to try random things that you can do. So you can apply that, and actually historically we've been applying this with customers for years, where we may do it in a marketing context, where we are continuing to deploy offers that are working well, but at the same time try offers that aren't necessarily working well. Now apply that thought that aren't working well, or we don't know how they're working, right? So over time we'll learn more, we'll be able to throw them away, we'll be able to use them.
Okay. Now, and so to that point, when you look at the data that really came out, call it January through May, you know, and we say, and all the turmoil that was taking place globally, how volatile do you believe that data is, and what does that mean to how we use that data?
So there's degrees of volatility in multiple places. So I think that we need to be looking at, the way we're looking at it with our customers is looking at it with skepticism. One of the things makes us fragile, if you will, is when we put high level of confidence on our standard reports and we don't question them. We have been looking at those reports for years now, right? But we should be looking at those with skepticism today. There's volatility on that data. And just because we had very clear demarked customer segments before, or borrower profiles, or we understood our customer base, it does not necessarily mean that our customers will continue to behave in the same way. So we need to look at those with a degree of skepticism.
Now, when you say skepticism, would you say you would discard the data and say it's too volatile, or do you feel as though that when you talked about disruptive data before and how you inject it, that you look at it more to gain learnings from that perspective?
Yeah, definitely I wouldn't throw it away. Definitely I wouldn't throw it away. But I think what we're doing when we think about the skepticism component, right? So what we're doing is we are intentionally going to those data sets, those segments, and looking at the before. How did those customers behave before? Understand that grounding information, and then look at those same segments today. Look at a variety of shift indicators. And this is not simple shift analytics where you raise something by a single variable. This is actually breaking your data up into those categories and seeing the changes. And most importantly, look beyond the segments you identified in the past and ask the question, what new segments are being generated? internally or externally, because it could be, you are seeing new segments generate internally within your data, and externally, they could be going elsewhere. So this is where machines without data are not going to get it necessarily. This is where we need the people, where we need the intuition to examine your whole market and not just focus on the data that we have.
And again, how do you do that in a way that is more iterative and allows you to be responsive? Because I mean, especially now, things are changing so quickly. So
Yeah.
how do you you talked about the historical bias, but there's also, I think, when you try to look to the future, there's so much, like we said before, there's so much unknown. So sometimes I think people feel like they have to overanalyze to be able to do things. So how do you find that balance, given the fact that the reality is things are just changing, whether we like it or not, and we don't want to overanalyze the data to the point where we don't make decisions?
Yeah, the paralysis, right? Get to paralysis on the data. Look, this is where it is very important to think about our traditional approaches. And I've been working on data analytics for a long time, and these traditional approaches that ground themselves on let's get all the data, let's have very optimized and efficient ETL processes, they take a really long time to develop and to become real. So even if you're really fast at doing this, it will take you weeks to be able to generate some data and ultimately get it into a place where you can analyze it. We don't have time for that anymore. There is no time. There wasn't time before, and really now there isn't time. When strategy for a company, we're talking about weeks to months, right? Strategic shift for a company, there is no time to wait until we go through an ETL process to ultimately start interacting with the data. So the very first thing that we do with our customers is look at, okay, let's not throw everything away, but let's think about those stable events. How do we maximize the stable events within your current environment? And how do we start interacting with data more quickly? What are things that we can do to integrate data quickly, analyze it, throw it away if it's not good, but if it is good, continue moving it on and get some learnings from it. So the process of getting to analyze data within weeks, it is now days, it is now hours, and so this is a critical area where we help our customers. We're not here to throw stuff away, but very selectively be able to put solutions in place that allow you to interact with your data quickly, be able to assess, is it good, is it not good, do I need additional pieces? I'll pause in a second here, but another important thing is not all of the data comes from the same place, and it lives in different systems. And in the case, excuse me, in the case of our customer that lost their inventory from China, there's inventory coming from a different place. We do not have times or weeks to be able to analyze that inventory and that inventory movement. We do not have time to wait for an convoluted ETL process to happen to start analyzing how inventory turns are happening on that new source. So we need to integrate it very quickly. So anyways, I digress.
No, that's all fantastic. That's what I was trying to get to. Kelly, you've been listening to Juan and I go back and forth, and I'm sure you and I could talk for hours, but I would really love, what's kind of going through your mind as you're listening to us have the conversation. What question would you have for Juan?
We've actually been getting some good questions coming in from the audience as well. I think the one that's really sitting with me right now in regards to what you just said, Juan, is do we really have to be that fluid with data and process right now?
Absolutely. So pardon me if I'm a little very passionate about this piece, but absolutely. Let's think about the way we make decisions. We are being influenced by so many data points ultimately, right? There are many things that happen throughout our day, whether it is watching the news or trying to shop for essentials for our family. We are bombarded by data. There has been a very large shift to digital. Think about any company that did business in person. This very large shift to digital is creating great amounts of new data. And that new data is very important now. And the new data is actually demonstrating the fluid nature of everything right now. Everything is moving. And this is where the situation with COVID-19 is actually exacerbating things. Yes, things were fluid before, but now there are shifts that are happening very, very quickly. So the situation is very fluid. So as a company that is looking to deliver value to our customers, we need to really think about how do we quickly gain access to that data and be able to make decisions on it, to deploy some actions, and ultimately, learn from it and continue to adjust. It almost feels a bit chaotic, right? But the thing is, it's about the approach that we take. It doesn't have to be chaotic. We can it's simply it's a very fluid situation with how everybody is interacting with the world. Very fluid situation. And we need to deploy an approach that allows us to see the reality of it and match that pace to be able to understand and make decisions and move forward. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And we did actually have a question on that come in from the audience. What are some ways to help you decide your data preparation is good enough for analysis?
Yeah, and this is a really great question, because it gets into in my mind, I hope it answers the question. It gets into the data governance components, right? So for a long time, we have been talking about, hey, you need to have one sales metric, and that's true. That makes sense. You need to have one version of the truth. And data governance is a very important piece of that. I think that it is very important to apply a couple of things. One is have an approach that allows you to integrate the data from multiple sources and, for example, virtualize it and analyze it at the source. Don't go through the effort of integrating data that may not be valuable in the long run, but definitely tap into that data, be able to analyze it. So the first thing I think about, be able to access data quickly and easily. The second piece is put it in a place and in a mechanism and a method where multiple members of your team can collaborate and work on it. The collaboration amongst team members brings in all of that knowledge from your organization. So the way we're doing this in for some companies, actually, I'm thinking about specifically an insurance company. There's multiple sources, and there are multiple subject matter experts coming from different teams. You know, they may have a finance perspective, a perspective that deals more with entitlements and how they're serving their customers. And when you bring all of that together, they are able to make modifications to that data, apply their own knowledge to it, and create a catalog and publish that in a way that it is, in a way, governed through the collaboration of those team members. And those are the folks that will know to throw it away if it's not good. Those are the folks that will know to validate it and make sure that it is accurate information.
So, Kelly, did the audience have another question, or did you want to go through? No? Okay. So once to that point, I was recently reading an article, a McKinsey article actually, and they were talking about just what organizations are focusing on right now. One of the things that they really said is that with the disruption to their businesses, obviously returning, you know, focusing on the priorities that are really going to return revenue, you know, quickly to the organization, and really going to help support, you know, the impact that's happened to them over the last several months. You know, and the approach that you were describing, you know, how would you apply that to helping organizations understand what to prioritize, and then not only that, to evaluate what they've prioritized to ensure that it is going to yield the result versus, you know, waiting too long and then they have to pivot and they've lost more time?
Yeah, I think time is a critical component, right? So time is of the essence on what you're describing. So the way the way that that I would use data in that perspective, it really goes back to the business of that company and the ways in which they create value to their customers and deliver it. We're really talking about, are there new ways that are being developed or that could be developed to deliver value to the customers, to understand their needs. So thinking through that, there's a layered approach where we can look at the shift in their customers, as we were chatting about before. There's going to be shifts from your customers, and there's a very important role to experimentation. There's a very important role to trying different approaches, learning from those quickly, and be able to keep the ones that are working, and you know, kind of deprioritize the ones that are not. And it's really about experimentation through the interaction. And this is where the process that we learn within analytics, and has been established for a long time within analytics. This is where that process is very helpful, where we engage with randomness and continue to apply these approaches to customer experience and be able to learn from those and adjust. And you know, it's experimentation is explore and exploit, and ultimately inform back to, are we generating value for our customers? Do we need to create additional value propositions for our customers?
So in sense of, are there different revenue sources that per se might be out there based upon the shift in needs and understanding those pieces?
Yeah, absolutely. So the ability to quickly integrate new sources, it's critical.
How do we experiment with data analytics? Other people don't talk about it like that.
Well, and look, I think this is the part of the dynamic nature, but experimentation is a big part of what we like to do in data and analytics. So there are, and that's where we come back to, there are very standard things, even those things are changing. So, but there are mostly standard things that we can ground on. But you know, experimentation is a part of everything companies do from a marketing perspective. We're always experimenting with different messaging, different creative, and it is built into the processes that we use. Now, not everybody does it, and not everybody does it well. So having an approach at creating those experiments and to plan out how we're going to run those experiments, having the knowledge and the experience of having done it before, so that you can actually collect the data that is going to allow you to measure it and make a decision from it. It's critical, and it's really a place where we help our customers, right? Because it may not be a common thing. So now take that thought process, and that can also apply to how you interact with your customers. For example, in a situation where you know, we have customers coming into the store, you have to have them wait outside because there's limitations how many people can come in. So what experiences are you delivering? Perhaps we can deliver a couple of different experiences and learn from that quickly and adjust as we go.
So Juan, before I'm going to take you back to something you said very early on in the conversation, where you had mentioned myths. You know, what are some of the challenges that you struggle with in overcoming with organizations, or in really navigating with them, that the myths that they have about the data? I mean, you talk about different things with stability and biases, but I'm sure there's more things that organizations kind of convince themselves with respects to data analytics and how they have to engage with it. I'd be curious your perspective.
Yeah, look, and I think that a lot of times we think about general approaches. We hear the wrong story coming from many places. Some of those are, I think we touched on. You have all the data you need. You have all of this data. All you need is get all your data into a data lake, a data ocean, data pond, or a data warehouse, and you're going to be able to get all the answers from it. That's a myth. That's going to make us fragile. That's going to make us ignore the new data that is being generated, or the new data that we need to be collecting. We can spend all of our time looking at historical data and find zero answers, especially nowadays when things have changed so much and things are shifting so much. So that's one. The other one is, it requires really large technology investments to be able to do what you're talking about, Juan. And the reality is, look, before happily joining MicroStrategies, I spent my career on the client side. And one of the things that we do on the client side is we're very careful with where we spend our dollars, where we deploy our dollars. And so that mindset, I think it's very important to help our customers make the right decisions. No, you do not have to spend a fortune to be able to get answers from your data. There are ways to work with it. And look, we put all of the solutions, all of the technologies that we work with, we put them through the ringer ourselves. And we ask the question, hey, would I use this? And would this give me what I'm looking for? And that's the approach that we take with anything that we leverage or that we bring in front of our customers.
So what would you say is the number one myth pre-COVID, and then now what would you say is the number one myth in COVID? Because obviously myths kind of evolve and emerge at every single stage and things we go through. So what would you say they would be?
Yeah, this that's a great question, and I don't know that I've thought to prioritize the myths that I'm running into all the time. But I think that a combination between lots of data and data governance can be challenging. Definitely were challenging in the past, right? Because you cannot get to this data, you cannot analyze this data until you go through the 10-step process to govern the data. And I really think that projecting that mentality forward into what we're doing today could be very damaging. Why? Because you will miss your opportunity and time. The time is now. Now, I'm not saying that we need to throw away, I'm not saying we need to throw away data governance. You don't necessarily need to be sloppy to be able to analyze data more quickly. There are approaches that challenge traditional approaches. We need to embrace those. So I'm not at all advocating for sloppy approaches. I'm advocating for applying the knowledge of your people to interacting with the data, enabling them to interact with the data. And what you get at the end is not a place where you have a lot of data stored. It's actually something that has been processed and curated. In a way, it's kind of like Netflix for data, if you will, right? So here's the answers I'm looking for. You go to your Netflix catalog. I think a lot of people are familiar with Netflix nowadays. You go and pick what you're needing right now to make a decision. There's a big component of underlying all of that, of challenging our own assumptions constantly and introducing randomness to what we're doing, trying to break it, not to break our business operations, right? We don't do it there, but we have to think about these things differently, because you know what, our competitors are. And if we don't do it first for our own data, we won't get a chance to deliver the value to our customers. It all comes down to that.
So you actually spurred a thought for me. You mentioned Netflix, and I know Netflix uses the concept and technology with respect to chaos monkeys, and they apply it, in different ways. What would be the equivalent chaos monkey for analytics?
Yeah, so there's multiple ways and multiple places. There's a lot of fragility in BI and decision support systems. So what happens to your model when you introduce a certain level of randomness? What happens to your model when you not only look at it from a vertical standpoint, but also from a horizontal standpoint, right? So if the series of variables that you were using to make a prediction or a decision are all of a sudden changing, they're no longer available, is your model going to adjust, or is it going to fall apart? I'm going to bet that 80%, if not more, 80% of the models out there are just going to become useless. And the solution is not to retrain the model. The solution is to think differently about how do we engage with that disruption. So from a modeling perspective, really think vertically and horizontally what additional data and changing in the data that we can apply to it, and horizontally, what are the different variables that become relevant, and how are you going to handle those different variables? This is where adaptive modeling comes in. So that's on the modeling side. I think on the other side is really you can actually do this exercise on the tabletop, and I actually enjoy doing this with my customers. You have a business decision to make, you have a data element that you're going to need. How do you get to it? Let's talk through your process. Let's understand what are the key components that need to happen. And when customers start doing that, right, going through that, they start running into, well, we have the ETL thing, then we have the data governance committee, and we have to schedule it and migrate it. You've lost your opportunity to make a business decision that could have driven an increase in customers. The other option is we just go do it. We just go do it, and we will deal with the data later. We're missing the opportunity to learn and adjust. So really looking at what are the time components that we need to consider. How relevant is this? How timely is our decision and action need to be? It's critical to the approach that we're going to take. Again, it's not have to be sloppy. It can be done in a modern way. Things continue to change, and we can, we need to embrace it.
So with that perspective, you've mentioned predictive and adaptive models. How predictive is the world today?
Not at all. Not at all. Predictive.
So do you not have any predictive models? Is it all adaptive models at this point, or?
Well, so we rely heavily on predictive models. What I was saying by not at all is those predictive models are very, very challenged right now, because the data that we had does not represent what is going on and what is going to happen. So time, I guess time is of the essence. Is important to transition from a predictive mindset to an adaptive mindset. And there's a lot of people that are doing great work on that, and there's a lot of great work that we're doing with some of our customers, discovering the new things that are happening, right? Chipping away at the unknown, because there is unknown. That's okay. We can't change the fact that it's there, right? But we can chip away at it and make it known. We can discover into it. So how predictive is the world? Not that much, but now is the time to not think, how do I fix my predictive models, but how should I be thinking? How should I be engaging with the uncertainty? How should I be chipping away at the unknown?
Okay, to discover what you don't know at this point in time. So what would you say is the number one challenge you're seeing your customers experience right now?
It's almost could be described as juggling, right? So figuring out how do I take care of my customers? How do I deliver new things that they need? How do I protect them? How do I take care of my associates and my teams? Those are some of the things that we're seeing, some of the things we're engaging with, and where data and analytics plays a critical role. I think I mentioned, one of the things we're looking at is how are stores designed, and taking information and learning from data that helps us understand our associates being protected, our customers dwelling too much in a specific place. Do we need to make some changes in our store to eliminate some of those bottlenecks? In the past, bottlenecks just meant, okay, we're going to put a product that we really want to sell in the spot because there's a lot of traffic. Now we're actually using data to sparse the experience a little bit better. Disney is opening back up, right? So so in the past was, how do we get everybody to go see the princess? I have 4 daughters, so I know about and I'm a big princess fan too. And so how do we get the princess? Now the question might be different. How do we distribute the traffic so we don't have overpopulations? So but data, data and analytics can really be a tool, can really be helpful helping answering these questions.
So really, leveraging those core underlying technologies, but to answer different questions and business needs that they're confronted with today with respect to their customer engagement and their workforce.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, as you really think about organizations moving, I guess, let's say beyond the crisis, but as we eventually, as things do open up, how when they integrate this data that has been so volatile with this data that starts to really inform what those new patterns may be and those different revenue sources that we talked through before, what would be your, I know you talked about discovery and kind of integrating those pieces. As you bring that data back that may be, and talk about stability and instability, as you bring that data back that may be demonstrating a little bit more of what that stability may look like, how would you apply that with what we've just went through over the last several months? Like, how would you, and I know you talked about, with the people, but how would you apply that and kind of making sure they learn as much as possible to help predict what those priorities may be?
Yeah, I think that there's a notion out there of colorful notions of normal, right? We like to talk about the new normal or a variety.
Never normal, right?
Yeah,
or the abnormal, right?
Yeah.
Constants of abnormal.
Yeah, I think there's shades of normality that are going to start to develop for sure.
New
But
patterns.
I think the important piece there is remain curious about what the anchoring events are, whether it is in your experiences, in your supply chain, on your financial stability. Remain curious about those. Are the anchoring events changing or shifting because of the new models that are emerging? Mm-hmm. So that remaining curious about this thing allows us to still ground on those stable events, but continue to evolve them as our operations continue to adjust. The idea of we're going to go back to the way things were, I don't know the answer. I don't think anybody does. But if I were a betting man, I would probably say things aren't necessarily going back to where they were. People are gaining new insights. We are all gaining new insights. We are all learning new tricks on what balance looks like. So we need to accompany that. But again, the sense of curiosity and continuing to use data to see where patterns are emerging and which patterns are temporary, which patterns are constant. We started talking in the beginning as having all this data and having all of these answers and these standard reports. We're really talking about shifting into, okay, you can have some standard things that are still going on, but have a set of systems and processes and approaches that align with the curiosity that we should have as organizations.
Absolutely.
So Lisa, I'm going to go ahead and jump in here if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
So we have about 5 minutes. Thank you. We have about 5 minutes left, and I know that we have a few unanswered questions from the audience. I'm going to go ahead and throw one of them out now. And then Lisa, push it back over to you so you guys can just talk about your top 3 takeaways from today's conversation. But one of the final questions from the audience was, what is your viewpoint on how to apply this to industries that have more online presence with customers but are impacted by this pandemic?
That have more online presence. I'm sorry, just making sure I'm understanding the question.
Yeah, what is your viewpoint on how to apply this to industries that have more online presence as opposed to store presence?
Yeah. Fair. That's a great question. I think that it applies in multiple places, because there may have been a watermark, a place where you were in your business from an online perspective, but now an influx of customers that were not there before are coming onto your space. When they were in the past, they may have been non-reachable customers. Now they are reachable customers. So how do we start to adjust and deploy approaches to gain a slice of those customers? The online space is heavily impacted by this influx of customers, because and it goes back to one of the things that I was chatting about earlier. Companies that develop new ways in meeting customers' needs are going to and have right now an opportunity to gain those loyalties. So whether you are an insurance company mostly online, or a mortgage company mostly online, which, by the way, if you're a mortgage company, you really need to think about the decision-making process that we had before on deciding whether to provide a loan or not, and the models, the risk models that we were using before and after, probably a whole other conversation on that. But there's an influx of customers online. For whatever reason, they may have been not reachable before, but now they're looking for lettuce and tomatoes, and they become reachable to you because they are online now. So how do we reach them? How do we develop those new loyalties? It's a very important point in the online space.
Thank you, Juan.
Thank you, Juan. So it's been a tremendously rich conversation, Juan. I appreciate it. And we've really anchored in, or you anchored in, really that focus on stability, that stable and unstable data, and how you look at the world today, and really making sure we kind of consider those biases as well when we're looking at that data. What would you say would be the top three takeaways, as Kelly said before, that you would want people to walk away from this conversation to ensure that, you know, we don't go back kind of to the way we consider data, and we really come at it from an integrating anti-fragility into the thought process with respects to data and analytics?
Yeah, thank you. So top three things for me would be curiosity. It's a key. It's a key component of what we are doing, how we engage with the world. So as we think about our strategy, our business, our business value that we're delivering to our customers, being curious about what additional things can we do, what different things can we do, what should we stick with that is working really, really well. So that curiosity on the business model perspective, the value created and the value delivered to our customers. That's number one. Number two, challenge the myths of whenever you are told time is impacted to make a decision, let's challenge those myths. And third, look for ways to interact with data quickly. Look for ways to get your team involved and give them an opportunity to participate in that process of generating rich data to learn about the uncertainties, discover together. So those would be three things. Thank you.
No, I appreciate it. Juan, thank you so much. It's been a great conversation. I've truly enjoyed it, and I've learned a lot in the conversations, and I hope everyone else who's listening does as well. So thank you so much.
Appreciate you guys.
Thank you, Juan. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you to everyone who joined us today. We invite you to check out our insights and events page on the website. We do plan to hold a few more sessions regarding embracing the world in crisis as it pertains to our different practice groups here at MicroStrategies. Stay safe, stay healthy, and have a great rest of your day. Bye.